Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Los Angeles, in the height of summer. The sun beat down on the modern facades of downtown, and the terraces were filled with chatty patrons seeking refuge from the sweltering heat in the shade of parasols. In this elegant setting stood the Golden Fork, a restaurant renowned for its refined cuisine and discerning clientele. Inside, the air was filled with the aromas of freshly ground coffee, warm croissants, and gourmet dishes. The waiters moved with speed and precision. Among them was Jason Miller, a young waiter in his early 20s, who wore an impeccable uniform but betrayed his impatience with his nervous gestures. Jason was ambitious, self-assured, but sometimes too self-assured, bordering on arrogance. That morning, one table in particular caught his eye. A man, sitting alone, with a simple yet elegant look, was calmly studying the menu. As Jason passed by the table, he immediately thought, "Hey, he looks familiar. That face, is it Keanu Reeves?" Without thinking, he let slip a comment in a low voice, thinking there was no risk. "Seriously, this guy never changes his style. Always the same gray t-shirt." Jason chuckled softly, proud of his insightful remark. What he didn't know was that the man he had just judged wasn't just the actor he thought he recognized. Behind that unassuming face was John Rivers, the restaurant owner, known for his discretion and his habit of going unnoticed when he wanted to observe his establishment. John looked up from his menu and met Jason's gaze. He said nothing immediately. The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity for the waiter, who suddenly felt a shiver of unease. He thought he had escaped the man's notice, but the man had heard every word. Jason's heart was pounding. He had no idea that this comment, which he considered insignificant, would become the starting point of a series of events that would change his career, his perception of others, and his own life. That morning, in that chic Los Angeles restaurant, a simple whisper would transform the life of a young waiter, and reveal that an unexpected encounter could sometimes contain a lesson more valuable than one could ever suspect. After the imprudent murmur, Jason Miller tried to concentrate on his service, but his mind was racing. Each step he took between the tables felt heavier, as if he were walking on invisible embers. He knew he had spoken too quickly, too loudly, but he kept telling himself that it was surely just an eccentric customer. He approached the table of the man in the gray t-shirt to take his order. His heart pounding, he attempted a confident smile. "Hello, sir, have you chosen?" asked Jason, his voice a little too fast. The man calmly raised his eyes and, with a gentleness that contrasted with Jason's mocking tone a few moments earlier, said, "Excuse me, were you talking about me earlier?" Jason felt as if the ground had given way beneath his feet. His throat tightened. No. I just wanted to." He stammered, unable to formulate a coherent excuse. The man smiled slightly, but his eyes were piercing. He continued, "My name is John Rivers. I am the owner of this restaurant." Jason instinctively recoiled in shock. He had insulted the man he thought was simply a famous actor, never imagining he was the boss of the place where he worked. Jason's face went from red to almost white, and he felt his hands trembling. Sorry. I didn't know," he murmured, almost pleading. John nodded calmly, as if to signify that he had heard every excuse imaginable. "I understand. But know that every word has weight. Here, your words have consequences." Jason felt panic turn into a chilling fear. He had always thought his job was simple: serve customers, smile, hurry. But he suddenly understood that life didn't work that way. John, seeing the young man's genuine distress, added, "I'm not going to fire you immediately. But you will be working under my direct supervision. And every mistake, every misstep, will be noted." Jason nodded, unable to speak. He understood that he had just crossed a line he should never have crossed, but that this mistake would be the beginning of a lesson far greater than he could have imagined. This first misstep, seemingly trivial, would mark the beginning of a journey that would transform Jason far beyond his career as a waiter. The end of his shift was approaching, but Jason couldn't concentrate. Each customer he served seemed blurry, as if floating in a haze of shame and fear. The image of John Rivers, sitting calmly at his table, staring at him with a mixture of gentleness and gravity, kept replaying in his mind. After the room had emptied slightly, John stood up and gestured for Jason to follow him. The young waiter felt his heart race. Was it for a reprimand? Public humiliation? Or worse, immediate dismissal? They entered a small private room at the back of the restaurant. The place was decorated simply, but with refined elegance: cream-colored walls, minimalist paintings, and a small library filled with cookbooks and film books. John sat down on a chair and invited Jason to sit opposite him. He spoke calmly, almost as if he were telling a story. "Jason, you just made a mistake that many people wouldn't even realize they were making. But first and foremost, I want you to understand something. I'm John Rivers, the owner of this restaurant, and yes, you insulted what you thought was just Keanu Reeves." Jason blinked in disbelief. Excuse me? You are the owner, and you're Keanu Reeves?" John gave a slight smile. "That's right. But I prefer to keep certain aspects of my life private. Here, I can observe the restaurant without the constant attention of the media." Jason felt his legs buckle slightly, as if the ground had just disappeared beneath him. He had spent the day judging this man, mocking him inwardly, and now he found himself face to face with him in an intimacy he had never imagined. John continued, his voice soft but firm. "What you said in a low voice isn't just an offense to me, it's a reflection of your arrogance and lack of conscience. But I'm not here to punish you. I want you to understand the value of your words and the impact they can have." Jason swallowed hard. I understand. I didn't mean to." John nodded, but his eyes expressed something deeper than simple anger, a silent, almost philosophical assessment. "So listen carefully, Jason. You'll continue to work here, but under my supervision. Every move, every word will be observed. This experience might seem harsh, but it's an opportunity to grow." Jason felt a mixture of fear and relief. He knew this day would be etched in his memory forever. This confrontation wasn't just a reprimand, it was a life lesson in disguise, and he had just begun a journey that would transform his perception of the world and himself. For the first time, Jason realized that what he thought was a simple waiter job was going to become a school of life, with John Rivers as an unexpected mentor. The days that followed were a mixture of anxiety and constant vigilance for Jason. Every movement in the restaurant seemed to be under John's invisible gaze, and the slightest misstep was felt as a monumental error. That morning, Jason was serving a table of busy regulars. He tried to stay focused, but his nervousness betrayed him. As he brought a tray of drinks, he lightly bumped a chair, knocking over a glass of water. The water splashed onto the floor and the pristine tablecloth. John, who happened to be passing by, approached calmly. His steps were silent but imposing. He placed a hand on Jason's shoulder. "Jason, come with me." The young waiter felt his heart race. Was this the end? Public humiliation? He followed John to the small private room, the same place where their first conversation had taken place. John sat him down and spoke in a calm but firm voice. "Today, you made a mistake. It wasn't just the dropped glass, it was the lack of focus, the lack of attention to detail. Every action counts in this restaurant, Jason." Jason lowered his eyes, unable to speak. He knew he had failed, and the weight of his clumsiness suddenly felt overwhelming. John continues. "Rather than send you away, I'm going to give you a chance. You'll stay here, under my direct supervision, and learn what it truly means to serve with respect and precision. Every dish you bring, every word you say to the customers, will be observed." Jason felt a mixture of fear and gratitude. He was not being punished with shouts or public humiliation. On the contrary, he was being guided towards discipline and self-control. For the first time, he understood that punishment was not a reprimand, but an opportunity to learn and improve. John stood up and placed his hand on Jason's back. Mistakes are lessons, Jason. What matters is what you do next. You can choose to let fear crush you, or you can get back up and learn. Jason nodded, determined. He knew this journey would be difficult, but he already felt something inside him beginning to change. Every misstep now became an opportunity to grow, and under John's watchful eye, he was beginning to understand the value of humility, attentiveness, and respect. For the first time, the young waiter realized that his mistake was not an end, but a beginning. In the days that followed, Jason began to see the restaurant in a new light. What he had thought was just a simple waiter's job now took on the air of a true school of life. Every gesture mattered, every smile, every word had an impact. John Rivers didn't just observe, he taught, silently at first, then with specific advice. One morning, while Jason was preparing a table for a VIP breakfast, John approached him. "Jason, look at how you arrange the cutlery. It's not just aesthetically pleasing, it's a silent language. Customers can read the care you put into the details." Jason followed his instructions, adjusting each knife, each napkin. He felt a subtle transformation, the stress gave way to a new, almost meditative concentration. Later, while serving a particularly demanding customer, Jason stammered slightly. John intervened, but not angrily. "Stay calm, observe and anticipate. Mistakes often come from inattention. Breathe and take your time, even when everything is moving fast." Jason realized that the man he had insulted wasn't just a boss or a famous actor. John possessed a rare patience and wisdom, capable of transforming a misstep into a lasting lesson. During breaks, John shared stories from his life, how he dealt with fame and the expectations of others, how he chose to remain humble despite his successes, and how attention to detail had been the key to his success, both in film and in running the restaurant. Jason listened, captivated. Each anecdote seemed like a window onto a wider, more subtle world, where humility and respect were the true marks of greatness. At the end of the day, as he wiped down the tables, Jason surprised himself by smiling genuinely. He was no longer the arrogant waiter he'd been at the beginning, the one who judged without knowing. He was beginning to understand that every interaction, every gesture, was an opportunity to become better. This slow but profound transformation marked the beginning of an inner change. Jason knew that under John's guidance, he would learn much more than a trade, he would learn the value of discipline, attention, and true humility. As the weeks went by, Jason felt a profound change within himself. Days at the restaurant were no longer just a succession of tables and orders, but opportunities to practice patience, attentiveness, and respect. Every interaction with a customer or colleague became an exercise in concentration and empathy. One morning, John invited Jason to take care of an important table on his own, that of a very demanding couple of regulars. Jason felt the adrenaline rising. This was his first real test, and he knew that any clumsiness would be noticed. Yet this time, he followed John's advice. He carefully observed the customer's gestures, anticipated their needs, and meticulously adjusted every detail. When the order arrived, he served it confidently, checking that each plate, each glass, each napkin was perfectly in place. The impressed couple complimented him warmly. "You are very attentive. Thank you for the impeccable service." Jason felt a surge of pride, but it wasn't arrogance. It was the satisfaction of realizing he had learned to turn a mistake into a strength. He understood that his past ridicule and initial nervousness were behind him. John, who had been discreetly observing from the bar, approached after the customers had left. "Well done, Jason. You're starting to understand what it truly means to serve. It's not just about bringing food. It's about anticipating, listening to, and respecting every person you meet." These words resonated with Jason. He realized that the most important lesson he had learned so far was not technical, but human. Respect and attentiveness were worth more than any speed or appearance. This new perspective changed not only his way of working, but also his personal life. He became more attentive to his loved ones, more humble, and more thoughtful in his words and actions. For the first time, Jason felt that he was no longer the arrogant and impulsive young waiter he had been at the beginning. He had begun to transform thanks to an unexpected mentor, and this transformation promised to go far beyond the restaurant. That evening, the restaurant was busier than ever. A special reservation had been made for a group of highly influential clients, local entrepreneurs, and celebrities whose opinions could have a major impact on the Golden Fork's reputation. Jason immediately felt the tension. Every move had to be perfect. He remembered John's advice: breathe, observe, and treat them as you would like to be treated. These words resonated in his mind like a mantra. As the evening began, Jason calmly took orders, checking every detail and anticipating requests before they were even made. He served the appetizers with precision, discreetly adjusting the plates to perfection, and offering a confident smile to each customer. At one point, a customer asked for a slightly modified dish. Jason hesitated for a split second, then remembered John's lessons: observe, understand, act respectfully. He carried out the request without hesitation and returned with the perfectly adapted dish. John, sitting in a discreet corner of the restaurant, watched silently. His eyes sparkled with satisfaction. He knew that Jason had taken a step forward. He had not only learned to serve, but also to anticipate, adapt, and manage pressure. When dinner was drawing to a close, the guests were unanimous in their praise. One of the men, impressed, declared, "You have a rare talent for service. Thank you for a perfect evening." Jason felt his heart fill with a new pride, but different from the pride he had known before. It was a deep feeling, born of competence acquired through attention and discipline, not through chance or luck. After the customers left, John approached and placed a hand on Jason's shoulder. "You see, Jason? Every action counts. What you just accomplished tonight is the result of your listening and your attention. You showed maturity and respect. That's exactly what I expected from you." For Jason, that evening was a revelation. He understood that his past mistakes were just steps towards something greater: self-control and confidence in his abilities. From that moment on, he knew he was no longer the same young waiter he had been at the beginning. He had crossed an important threshold, and John continued to guide him towards even greater responsibilities and even deeper lessons. Weeks passed, and Jason was no longer just a waiter under observation. He was becoming a true pillar of the Golden Fork. John had begun to entrust him with more important tasks, testing his ability to handle pressure and take initiative. One Monday morning, John called him into the small private room. "Jason, today you'll be managing the inventory and supervising 2 new servers. I want to see how you apply what you've learned." Jason felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. These responsibilities were far greater than he had ever imagined, but he was determined not to disappoint John. Throughout the day, he noted every detail: how the new servers placed the cutlery, how they interacted with the customers, and how the kitchen prepared the dishes. He gave specific advice, corrected minor errors diplomatically, and encouraged his colleagues with just the right words of motivation. John watched from the bar, silent but attentive. At one point, he approached and said, "You handle the pressure well, Jason. You're not just a waiter anymore. You're starting to become a leader." Jason felt a surge of pride. This compliment was different. It wasn't just praise for serving a table properly, but recognition of his ability to guide and inspire others. Later, John invited Jason to work with him on new dishes and the organization of the restaurant space. Together, they revised the menu, tested recipes, and discussed how every detail could improve the customer experience. Jason realized that the trust John placed in him wasn't unpaid. It was the result of his attentiveness, discipline, and willingness to learn. Every day, he gained a little more maturity and respect, not only for the restaurant, but also for himself. This evolution transformed his perspective. He understood that past mistakes, far from being failures, were the foundations of his current success. And for the first time, Jason felt he was part of a team where respect, consideration, and trust were the true values. Over time, the relationship between Jason and John went beyond the strictly professional. What had begun as strict supervision gradually transformed into a mentorship and friendship. One evening, after service, when the restaurant was almost empty, John invited Jason to stay and chat over coffee in the small private room. The atmosphere was relaxed, a far cry from the tensions of the first few weeks. You've changed a lot, Jason, John began, his kind gaze fixed on him. It's not just your work that's improved, it's your attitude, your way of thinking, the way you treat others. Jason felt his heart warm. He realized that John no longer saw him as the clumsy and arrogant waiter, but as a young man capable of growing and learning. Thank you, John. You've really opened my eyes to so many things. I never thought a simple job could transform me so much. John smiled and told her stories from his own life, away from the spotlight, moments of doubt in his acting career, lessons learned from his mistakes, and how he had learned to remain humble despite success. Each anecdote was punctuated with subtle advice on patience, respect, and empathy. Over the weeks, these discussions became regular. Jason was learning not only to be a better waiter, but also to become a more thoughtful and considerate man. He began to apply these lessons in his personal life, with his family and friends, and felt a profound transformation within himself. One evening, while they were clearing the tables together, Jason found himself laughing with John. You know, I never thought that insulting someone could lead to this incredible friendship, he said, a genuine smile on his face. John burst into a soft laugh. Sometimes, mistakes are the best starting points for learning and growing. And you, Jason, had the courage to turn a mistake into a lesson. This unexpected friendship became a source of strength for Jason. He understood that human relationships, based on respect and trust, could transform lives. And thanks to John, he had found not only a mentor, but also a true friend. A few months had passed since the initial incident. Jason was no longer the nervous and arrogant waiter he'd been at the beginning. He had become a pillar of the restaurant, respected by his colleagues and appreciated by the customers. But that day, he would discover that his efforts were recognized far beyond the dining room. John had organized a private screening of one of his films for special guests. It was not just a cinematic event, it was an opportunity for John to demonstrate the importance of discipline and respect in all spheres of life, including service and hospitality. Jason had been invited to participate, not only to supervise the service at the event, but also to be recognized in front of all the guests. At first, he felt a familiar nervousness rising. The public attention reminded him of his past mistakes. But this time, he remembered all of John's lessons: patience, observation, humility. He coordinated the service with precision, anticipating the guests' needs, discreetly correcting minor errors, and ensuring that every dish and drink was perfect. At the end of the screening, John stood up in front of the guests and said a few words. Tonight, I would like to recognize someone who turned a mistake into a life lesson. Jason Miller, our server, demonstrated that with attention, discipline, and respect, everyone can grow and improve. An admiring silence followed, then warm applause erupted in the room. Jason felt an intense emotion wash over him. For the first time, he felt the pride of having accomplished something real and lasting, beyond simply serving at a table. John then approached him, a proud smile on his face. You've come a long way, Jason. What you've accomplished isn't just for this restaurant, but for yourself. Never forget that true greatness is measured by how you learn from your mistakes and how you treat others. Jason nodded, his eyes shining. He understood that his journey, which began with a simple mockery and a mistake, had profoundly transformed him. What he thought was just a job had revealed his capacity to grow, to inspire, and to become better. This public recognition was more than an honor, it was tangible proof that his efforts had paid off and that his choices, guided by John's teachings, had truly changed his life. Weeks passed, and Jason was no longer the same young man he had been at the beginning. He had become not only a competent waiter, but also a quiet leader, respected by his colleagues and appreciated by the customers. Every gesture, every word he uttered testified to the discipline and attentiveness he had cultivated under John's guidance. One morning, while preparing the dining room for brunch, Jason took a moment to observe the restaurant. He thought back to that fateful day when he had insulted John, mistaking him for just another customer. That memory, once a source of shame, now brought a smile to his face. He understood that this mistake had been the starting point of his transformation. John entered, as usual, discreet but attentive. He placed a hand on Jason's shoulder and said, "You've grown, Jason. not only as a professional, but also as a man. You now know that every action counts, that every word has an impact, and that respect and humility are essential. Jason nodded. I understand now, John. It's not just the restaurant, or the service, it's my way of life, my way of treating others. John smiled, satisfied. Exactly. The real lesson doesn't end here. It will accompany you everywhere, in every relationship and every choice you make. That evening, after service, Jason lingered for a few moments in the private room. He reflected on his journey, the arrogant waiter, the mockery, the fear, the learning, the responsibilities, and finally, the recognition. All of it had profoundly transformed him. He realized that unexpected encounters, even those that seemed negative at first, could change an entire life if one had the courage to learn and grow. Jason left the restaurant, his heart light, his gaze fixed on the future. He knew he would never be the same again. He had learned that mistakes could become stepping stones, and that respect and attention could transform lives, sometimes more than any talent or material success. And as John watched his young protégé, he knew that his mission had been accomplished. Not only had he guided Jason to mastery of his craft, but he had sown in him the seeds of a life guided by wisdom, humility, and compassion.